All right, welcome to Agent Prep with Lillie Hendy. Remember to tap that subscribe button and click the little bell so you get notified every time I post a new video, and go ahead and like this video. All right. Very good. Okay, we're going to continue on. This is the source that we're using right now. It is the Texas Real Estate Sales Exam. It is 287 pages, as you see up here with the mouse that I'm moving, and it is an old source, so keep that in mind. There are some questions that the answers are wrong because this was done in 2006. However, it is an excellent source because it has 4 exams. See, exam 1, exam 2, exam 3, exam 4. It is 4 exams of 110 questions, 80 national, 30 state. Now currently you take 120 questions in the exam and you're having to get a 70 score. So you get 2 minutes per question, okay? However, you don't necessarily take 2 minutes. And it also has the glossary, the vocabulary, that's where I'm using it. And once we finish all of these 4 exams, I'll be moving into 2 new sources that I bought. This is the glossary. National questions from 1 to 80, and this is one of the things that I really like on how it answers. It gives you an explanation. It gives us an explanation for the answers, okay? And state questions, same thing, answers. And then I also have pulled up the 1 to 4 family residential contract so that if there are some questions where it refers to the contract, then we'll review it there. Okay, with that said, we will continue, we will start. Okay, let's see. Tanisha said, yes, you can hear me. Okay, now I have the radio a little bit on the background. I heard, some individuals say that it's calming. And I did notice that there's some other noise in the background, and I don't know what it is. It could be the ceiling fan or the air condition, but I can't figure out what this light background noise is. If the radio is bothering you all, let me know. I will turn it off. Okay, so we are starting with directional growth and the direction towards which certain residential sections of a city are expected to grow. So for example, here in San Antonio, it's growing almost in every direction. North on 281, northeast, northwest, towards Elotes, and further up, it's going west and east, because we're a military city, right? So there is a lot of movement coming in from the military. So, and the population is increasing. We're at 1.5 million within San Antonio, 2.5 million with the suburbs, and expected to grow to about 2.5 million, just San Antonio, for 2040. So that's what directional growth, okay? What direction is the city growing? Okay, discount point, 1% of the loan amount charged. Thanks, Sharon, for helping, because yes, I'm not going to interrupt the class to help and be answering questions on Messenger. Okay, discount point, 1% of the loan amount charged by a lender at closing to increase a loan's effective yield and lower the fair rate to the borrower. So an individual will pay a certain amount, okay, to reduce their interest rate, thus for reducing their monthly payment. And this will be paid at closing when the negotiating of the interest rate. You can ask for a lower rate, and the borrower can go to different lenders to do comparisons. Okay, discount rate. The rate that lenders pay for mortgage funds. A higher rate is passed on to the borrower. So if they're getting discount rates from FHA or the government, then they pass those on to the borrower. Dispossess, to remove a tenant from property by legal process. So for example, as an eviction, it has to go through the local court. It doesn't have to go to the huge court, it can go to the small precinct courts and it'll go faster. Dominant estate, tenement, property that includes the right to use an easement on adjoining property. Okay, so the dominant estate is the person that doesn't own the easement. They're using the easement that belongs to somebody else. Once that easement is recorded, you are the dominant estate, the tenement, like the tenant, okay? And you have a right to use that easement. That owner cannot cancel that unless, let's say, you end up building a new road, you install a new well, you install a new septic, whatever the easement may be, you can create your own and then removing that easement. In the courthouse, dower, the right of a widow in the property for her husband upon his death in non-community property states. So we've heard this in history, like in the Roman days in Italy, and you know, when the landlords, okay, would marry off their daughters, they would have to give so much property, and here she gets it in property estates. So the right of a widow in the property of her husband upon his death in non-community property state. So that's her dower. And she can take that with her if she gets married again, remarries. Down payment, the part of the purchase price that is the buyer pays in cash and is not financed with a mortgage or loan. So if a person is getting an FHA loan, the down payment requirement is 3.5%. Therefore, if the home is $1 million, okay, they're going to pay 3.5% of that $1 million as their down payment. So a smaller number, okay, let's say it's 100,000, so it'll be 3,500. That's the down payment. In $1 million, it'll be like what, 350? I mean 35,000. Okay. Dual agency. Did I calculate that correctly? So if you take 3.5% of 1 million, right, times 0.035, yep, 35,000. Just wanted to make sure I was giving you the right answer. If I'm going to use an example, I better be sure I know what's going on. I'm providing the right answers. Okay. Hi, Sharon. Thank you for joining us. Dual agency. We don't have dual agency in Texas, right? We can only represent one party. An agent who represents both parties in a transaction. However, the broker becomes an intermediary, which is almost like dual agency because they're representing both sides through the realtors on the same property. Okay, so let's say I have the property listed and you know, at EXP, and Sharon is also at EXP, and she represents the buyer and brings an offer. So now both of us are under the same broker and we're dealing with the same property. That broker becomes the intermediary. They cannot negotiate or advise, they just mediate to make sure any issues are resolved. Due on sale clause, a provision in a mortgage that allows the lender to demand repayment in full if the borrower sells the property that serves as security for the mortgage. So I learned from investors that the due on sale clause, when we sometimes buy property and we take over the current mortgage, so the property is conveyed to our name, but the current loan stays in place. It's not a, what do you call it? Gosh, I lost my train of thought here. When FHA or VA allows it to take over somebody else's loan. So in this case, the due on sale clause says that you can't convey the property to somebody else. However, if it's all done legally, there required documents, it can be conveyed to somebody else and the payment continues to be going to the lender. And they're getting what they need. We protect the borrower's credit and we end up purchasing a property. If that borrower is in default, the lender can demand payment, okay, in full, like now. Duress, the use of unlawful means to force a person to act or to refrain from an action against his or her will. Okay, let me, it's bothering me that I don't remember the term, but there is assuming the loan, okay? VA will allow assumption of loans. However, the borrower still has to qualify. So duress, the use of unlawful means to force a person to act or to refrain from an action against his or her will. So if somebody is being forced to buy a property, okay, and with scare tactics, or they're sick, and that is will not be a valid sale, okay, because it's being done under duress. Okay, we're now going into the E's. Earnest money. Down payment made by a buyer of real estate is evidence of good faith. So every time we have a contract between a buyer and a seller, we represent the buyer or we represent the seller. We want to make sure we have earnest money. It's very rare, in my experience, I have seen, because remember, we don't have to have money. It can be any consideration. It could be a collateral of a property. It can be a promise to pay the earnest money within a few days or a certain period of time, because let's say it's going to be wired. However, there has to be a consideration of some form to make it a valid contract, and that is an agreement between the seller and the buyer. So that is done in good faith. That earnest money becomes at risk after the option period. Easement, the right of one party to use the land of another. Okay, that's what I was mentioning on the other, which is, it was called the dominant estate. Okay, the other one is the servant estate, subservient estate. Okay. So they're using the land of another for a particular purpose, such as lay utility lines. So that are utility easements. The easement I was talking about was, a well, a driveway, a septic tank, or easement to the creek or the lake or something like that. There are easements that are recorded for all utility companies, and we own the land, however, we can't build on it. Easement by necessity. An easement granted by law and requiring court action that is deemed necessary for the full enjoyment of a parcel of land. An example would be an easement allowing access from landlocked property to a road. Do you all understand what landlocked is? So it says locked land. So in order to access a property that's behind you and there's no road access to, we will have to go through the owner of the parcel that's along the road. So this becomes an easement by necessity. And at a certain point, they can negotiate to buy a certain portion of the land, a narrow piece that goes along their property in order to get to their property. So that will convert it into a flag lot, because now it'll be shaped like a flag. There'll be a post, and that's the driveway to get to the back of the land. But that has to be negotiated and not rezoned, resurveyed, okay, in order to provide that. Easement in gross, okay, so you know the gross thing, right? It's the initial amount, not, I'm talking about money, okay, as an example. A personal right granted by an owner with no requirement that the easement holder own adjoining land. So the easement holder is who? That's the dominant party, because the owner is the servient party. Economic life. The period of time over which an improved property will generate sufficient income to justify its continued existence. So the economic life, according to an accountant, unless it has changed, it's like 27 and a half years. So every year they'll depreciate 1/27th and a half of the property value. After 27 and a half years, its life, economic life is done. So most investors will sell them because now they don't have any tax advantage, any write-offs as far as that particular type of write-off. They'll still have, property taxes. If they have a loan, they'll have that, maintenance and such. Effective age, an appraiser's estimate of the physical condition of a building. The actual age of the building may be different than its effective age. Should the property be upgraded, improved, completely gutted and redone, then its effective age will be today because it was totally redone. It doesn't mean it's a brand new house. So he may give it another year that is similar, okay, to an improved property or a new build. However, it can't necessarily be, a brand new property again, but almost, okay? It'll increase the value. That's the effective age. And again, they are estimates, okay? Keep that in mind. What the appraiser provides is a calculated estimate based on comparables, adjustments, and costs at some point, at some times. Implements, cultivated crops, generally considered to be personal property. So let's say you're selling land, like I deal with a lot of land and acreage and farmers in my little hometown of Mercedes. Okay, I dealt with a lot of agriculture owners that have moved, and the agriculture is not as big as it used to be. So the implements on their property is the crop, the cultivated crop. That is considered personal property. Okay, that does not get conveyed or transferred when a property is sold. The landowner has to give the lessee, the person that's leasing the land and growing the crop, the right to harvest. And they usually harvest in August and then start to replant in September. And they pay their lease around the 1st of September. And it's usually $100 per acre. Things that you may or may not deal with, but if you're going to end up dealing with residential land or commercial land or agriculture, those are things that you will learn. Eminent domain, the right of a government to take private property, okay, eminent domain, the right, very important keyword, is the right of a government to take private property for public use upon payment of its fair market value. Eminent domain is the basis for condemnation proceedings. See, it's the basis for condemnation proceedings. So eminent domain, it means the government is going to need a piece of your land for public use. So they have to let you know that they need that piece of land, and they're going to offer you a fair market value. In order to get that piece of land, they go to court and they take action called condemnation proceedings. So it has to be taken to court in order to make that active. So they take, the right is eminent domain. The action to go to court and take possession of the property once they make an offer that's agreed upon is called condemnation. Now those two are tied together. Encroachment. A trespass caused, so think of roach. What do roaches do? They encroach on everything around our house, right? They trespass through the cabinet, the floor, under the washer, under the refrigerator, through our clothes. So roaches trespass, so encroachment. A trespass caused when a structure, such as a wall or fence, invades another person's land or airspace. These roaches, they invade our property, right? Through walls and fences and other areas. And some of them are huge and they fly here in Texas. Encumbrance. I mean, they all fly, however, some are huge. Encumbrance, anything that affects or limits the title to a property, such as easements, leases, mortgages, or restrictions. Encumber, okay, they're attached to the property and it has to be cleared, so it becomes a cloud on title, and that has to be cleared prior to the property being sold and conveying to the buyer. Any questions so far? Okay, I know there's 8 of you watching or listening, so if you have any questions at any time, type it in. If we were doing Zoom, we could be able to talk to each other, right? However, it costs money and I would have to have everybody participating. Equitable title. Equitable title. The interest in a piece of real estate held by buyer who has agreed to purchase the property but has not yet completed the transaction. The interest of a buyer under a contract for deed. So they have an equity on that piece of land or property. Okay, so it's under a contract for deed, meaning they are buying the property, but it did not convey to their name. It's still under the owner's name until it is paid for. So they have a right to agree. So agreed to purchase the property, but has not yet completed the transaction, means it hasn't conveyed over to them until it's paid for. So they have an interest in a piece of property. Equity, the difference between the current market value of a property and the outstanding indebtedness due on it. So the difference between today's value and the loan balance that is owed. Not the original loan, but what is owed today after paying months and years on that mortgage or that deed of trust, right? In the state of Texas, mortgages are called deed of trust. Equity or of redemption. Redemption. The right of a borrower to stop the foreclosure process. So the investors will buy property at the tax auction, okay, at the tax foreclosure or the tax sale on the first Tuesday of every month. Well, that borrower has to be given 2 years to pay their taxes, so they still have equity of redemption to get that property back and not completely lose it. That they can also stop that foreclosure. In a tax sale, that means that it was sold, it was foreclosed, but it has to be held by that new owner for 2 years in case that borrower pays the taxes that are owed. And at that point, the first year they pay 25% interest on the balance due. The second year they pay 50% interest on the balance due. Erosion, the gradual wearing away of land by wind, water, and other natural processes. So we say a piece of land erodes. Escalation clause. So escalation. So the due on sale clause and escalation, okay, are similar. It's going to speed up the payment of the loan. A clause in a lease allowing the lessor to charge more rent based on an increase in cost, sometimes called a pass-through clause. Okay, so here it's mentioning on a lease, but there is an escalation clause also by the lender, okay, to increase the speed of which the loan has to be paid off. It's cheat. I try to remember this as people thinking they're being cheated out of their money or something that they wanted to own. The claim to property by the state when the owner dies intestate and no heirs can be found. Remember last time I said within, without, that means it's without a will. So when there is no will, it goes to the state if there aren't any heirs that can be found. Yet somebody that was taking care of them or other friend said, hey, you know, he told me that I was going to get the property when they passed away. Well, if there was nothing in writing, then they feel cheated. That's why I said relate as cheat with the word being cheated of owning a property. So it goes to the state. And to remember, testate, intestate. One of my students said, well, within, without. So in, without a will. So I'd say within, without, right? A good way to remember it. Escrow, the deposit of funds and/or documents with a disinterested third party for safekeeping until the terms of the escrow agreement have been met. So the escrow agreement is the contract that we delivered for the buyer after the seller and the buyer have come to mutual understanding and agreement and have signed and everything is executed. Then it goes to the escrow department, right? And there is an escrow amount that is left to the title company, and that is a third party. The escrow can also be with the lender. The lender requires escrow, meaning they want you to be including the taxes and insurance with the monthly mortgage payment. Therefore, they create a little escrow, a safekeeping, okay, until the escrow agreement have been met. So then the taxes, okay, they collect a certain amount, they safe keep it, okay, it's like a little budget account, and then they pay the property taxes when they're due, and they pay the insurance when it's due. And that is called an escrow account. A trust account established to hold escrow funds for safekeeping until disbursement. And disbursement means what? Paying. Escrow analysis. Annual report to disclose escrow receipts, payments, and current balances. So this is what the title company will do, the escrow officer before closing, and put everything on the closing disclosure spreadsheet, settlement statement, and what the lender will provide every year. The bank will provide, the mortgage will provide every year on your escrow receipts, any payments they made, and what the current balance of your escrow is. And the monthly mortgage payment can increase or decrease based on what? Your principal and interest never change unless there's some adjustment with the interest rate. So the things that change are taxes and insurance. And typically property taxes, insurance go up, so then the monthly payment will go up, and they may say, okay, you need to add money to your escrow account to cover the difference. Escrow disbursement, money paid from an escrow account. So once everybody signs and the escrow officer at the title company receives the money from the lender has approved all the document, they say, okay, you can pay all the debts that are due. So the escrow officer will pay the mortgage for the owner, will pay any property taxes that are due, pay the insurance that was paid in advance, and any types of things like that. And they'll disburse also our commission, right? They can also pay for appraisals. They can pay, no, the appraisal is usually paid by the borrower to the lender. For the survey, no, those are all disbursements that are made, money paid by the escrow officer. It can also be done by the lender, okay, when you have a mortgage. Estate, an interest in real property, okay? That's all estate is, an interest in real property. And real property is land. The sum total of real property and personal property owned by an individual, okay? So, so that's what is included in a statement. Real property, okay, is the land and improvements. However, the estate can include the sum of any real property or personal property. Estate for years. So they have an interest on a property for a number of years. It's like a leasehold estate, granting possession for a definite period of time. And so there's usually a start date and an end time. It could be for 5 years, 10 years, or an estate for life, which would be until they pass away. So estate, they have an interest. They're leasing. When somebody rents a property from us, they have an estate. They have an interest in that property. They don't own it. They're leasing it. So it's a leasehold. Estate tax, federal tax levied on property transferred upon death. Estoppel certificate, a document that certifies the outstanding amount owed on a mortgage loan as well as the rate of interest. Okay, so the lender will, the escrow officer, okay, will request a payoff, and so they'll get like an estoppel certificate. There are also estoppel certificate when there are let's say we're selling a property that is a rental for a seller, and they have a bunch of tenants, but they don't have lease agreements. Then they have to complete estoppel certificates. Each of they is the tenant, in order so that we know and there's agreement and understanding that they're being charged a certain amount of rent, and when it started and when it expires. Et al., abbreviation for the Latin phrase et alias, meaning and another. Et ux, abbreviation for Latin term et uxor, meaning and wife. Okay? So et ux and wife, et vir and husband. So those are Latin terms. Eviction, the lawful expulsion of an occupant from real property. And that can be from a home, from an apartment, from a piece of land, commercial land, anything. Evidence of title, but it has to be done legally according to the laws of the state, the landlord-tenant laws. Evidence of title, a document that identifies ownership of property. So the title company, okay, will do a title search of the status of events, a list of events that happened with that property, who the owners are, if there's any liens, any attachment, any encumbrances, anything owed, child support, mechanics liens, taxes owed. All that will be done on the title search, okay? But the evidence of title, okay, is the warranty deed, document that identifies ownership of property. Examination of title. So that was the title report or title settlement that the title company will run a search, okay, on the conditions of title, and that's called an abstract. So it'll be an examination of title. Once they do this within 3 to 7 days or 10 days, they'll provide the owner, the borrower, the realtors, hopefully, that's the way it's supposed to happen, a title report so that we can review that, and then they'll let us know what needs to be cleared, if there are any items that need to be cleared before we can close. Exchange, a transaction in which property is traded for another property rather than sold for money or other consideration. So individuals sometimes exchange properties. If they're buying something, they'll also exchange personal property, vehicles, or things like that. Exclusive agency listing, a contract between a property owner and one broker that only gives the broker the right to sell the property for a fee within a specified period of time, but does not obligate the owner to pay the broker a fee if the owner produces his own buyer without the broker's assistance. The owner is barred only from appointing another broker within this period of time. So the type of listing that we want is the exclusive right to sell agency listing, so that we become we get paid whether they get the buyer or we get the buyer. So both types of listings are called an exclusive agency listing. Yet the one that we want is the exclusive right to sell. A contract between a property owner and a broker that gives the broker the right to collect a commission regardless of who sells the property during the specified time of the agreement. Execution, the signing of a contract. Executor, executrix, a person named in a will to administer an estate, right? An interest in property. The court will appoint an administrator if no executor is named. Executrix is the feminine form. Okay, it's almost like here. Executrix is wife. Ix, see, I'm learning some of this stuff, I forget it because we don't use it. However, it has to, if it goes to the court, the judge assigns an administrator. If there is a will, there's an executor or an executrix. Executory contract, a contract in which one or more of the obligations have yet to be performed. So once the contract gets executed, signing of the contract, it goes to the title company. Once it closes, then it becomes an executory contract. It means everything has been performed. All obligations are done. Hey, that's an awesome top place to stop. So we're 40 minutes into it. So for vocabulary, we will start with executed contract. What's the other one? Okay, executory. Okay, executed contract. Okay, on page 165. Okay, so that's what we'll start on Saturday. Should we have a lesson? I might be making a trip. So if I do some traveling, we won't have the class. Okay, so that is the vocabulary for today. Any questions? Okay, let's see. Guadalupe, let's see. Vernica asked, does earnest money have to be cash? No. Earnest money is a consideration. It can be a promissory note. It can be an other piece of property using as collateral. However, in our experience, we typically get earnest money as cash. And basically, the title company will say wire it in or get a cashier's check. It can be a check. However, if they bounce, then we've got some issues. Okay. So it does not have to be cash. Okay, Guadalupe Sanchez. I was asked about property that had been affected by toxic waste. I don't remember reading anything about this, but I remember the answers were all color related. Oh yeah, they're called like brown fields. Gray, green, brown, or black something. Yeah, it's a waste contaminated is called a brown field. I figured this would have been in the glossary. Let's see here. But I can't figure it out. Okay, so when you can't figure it out, what did I say? Let's see here. If it's find brown field. Let's see if it'll find it. Okay, it didn't find it there. So, if it's not in the glossary, next best place, is to look it up in, hold on, let me get a tab over here. All right, just go to Google and brownfield. In urban planning, brownfield land is any previously developed land that is not currently in use that may be potentially contaminated. Okay, so okay, so the way you stated your question, so it's a toxic waste. So it has to be cleaned, Guadalupe, and treated before it can be transferred if it's toxic. Let's say it was a gasoline station and they were gasoline tanks underground. They have to remove those. They have to clean everything on there before they can be sold. That's what brownfields are called. And then greenfield versus brownfield investment. Greenfield investments are two types of foreign. Okay, let's do greenfield versus brownfield land. So greenfield is an area of agriculture, of forest land, and the brownfield is abandoned commercial land where hazardous substances or contaminants are typically present. If it does exist on private property, it also has to be cleaned, okay? So this is a quick way to get answers, okay, for your questions if it's not in the glossary. All right, welcome to Agent Prep with Lillie Hendy. Remember to tap that subscribe button and click the little bell so you get notified every time I post a new video, and go ahead and like this video.